Now, fear in itself is not a bad thing. God created fear because when we have a real threat, like the famous tiger example about fight and flight, right? So a tiger's about to attack. You are listening to the JP Show,
where we discuss the issues you care about from a Jewish perspective.
I am Rabbi G.
And I am Rabbi Levi.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. Okay. Rabbi Levi, how are you?
Doing well. Exhausted. We had a very, very big event on Thursday night, BINA 25.
It was amazing.
It was
very
beautiful.
Have you rested a bit afterwards?
Not really, because the BINA program doesn't stop.
That's great.
Continues full force. All the classes, everything's on.
But I have to say, it was a really, really, truly beautiful event with so many different kinds of people. Really, a BINA style concept, and I think it gave the opportunity for people from different streams of BINA to see that they're part of a much bigger thing than their stream.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Young and old, affiliated, more affiliated, less affiliated. It was really beautiful, and the energy was fantastic. Those musicians were unbelievable.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. Really, really nice.
And the food was good too, so which is always always a bonus.
For sure. All right, so today's topic we're going to discuss, today's question, is anxiety. And
I see. So last week we had anxiety, and now we're going to talk about it.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe you're doing a whole series about anxiety now on Thursday mornings.
Yep.
Called Thriving with Anxiety.
Correct.
So, what's the Jewish view on anxiety?
The Jewish view on anxiety.
That's right.
Well, before we can talk about the Jewish view on anxiety, can we first define anxiety?
A good idea.
I mean, there could be many definitions, but I'll tell you the one I'm working with at the moment, because I'm working through, based on a new book that's come out called Thriving with Anxiety. And he makes a very interesting point, written by a Jewish fellow, actually, an Orthodox Jew. And he says people need to understand the difference between stress and anxiety. Stress is about, now also before we get to what stress is, anxiety and stress can have similar symptoms, and that's why they're often confused, but they're actually different. First of all, stress isn't always such a bad thing. He doesn't talk about this, but let me just highlight that. Today, people don't like to be uncomfortable, so what happens is, as soon as things get uncomfortable, we're stressed. That's not a bad thing. We actually should be uncomfortable. We should work hard. Life is about working hard. Growth only comes through discomfort, actually. Rabbi Twersky gives the famous analogy of the lobster. Apparently, a lobster, it grows because it sheds its shell. But it sheds its shell because it feels uncomfortable with its shell. The shell doesn't grow. So it feels very uncomfortable. It goes off into a cave somewhere and sheds it, and then goes a new one. So the feeling of discomfort is a reminder that you have to grow. And generally, we always have to go out of our comfort zone. So, working hard is not stress. But stress is when we become overwhelmed. This is what he says. It's an interesting point. We all have demands and resources. So demands are things we have to do in life. Family commitments, work commitments, spiritual commitments, whatever the commitments are. And then we have resources. Resources can be time, it can be money, it can be rest, it can be strength, it can be emotional resources, intellectual resources. And stress is when the resources don't match the demands. The demands are more than the resources.
I like that.
Right? That's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And that's not a terrible thing. It's a good thing to just recalibrate. And when you start to feel stressed, to give a think about your resources and your demands. Now, again, one has to be very careful. Like sometimes we overdo this. I need more resources. So I need to take breaks and self-care and all this kind of stuff. So we have to be careful. It doesn't come out of hand. But there are times that we're just overdoing it, right? So we have to either lower the demands on some fronts sometimes, or we have to increase the resources. We have to make sure we're doing exercises. We are, we're having the correct spiritual stimulation, and we are taken care of so that we can match the demands and the resources. Anxiety is something totally different. Anxiety fundamentally is a bad thing, although it doesn't have to be, but it can be channeled to be a good thing. But anxiety is very related to fear. Right? When we're scared of something, we're anxious about something. Now, fear in itself is not a bad thing. God created fear because when we have a real threat, like the famous tiger example about fight and flight, right? So a tiger's about to attack. So there's a fight or flight response, or sometimes there's a frozen response, which isn't good. So you either fight or you run away. And that's a good thing. If we didn't have any fear, we'd be in danger a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
But anxiety essentially is about when you have fear you're scared about something with no real credible threat. There's no immediate threat. It's not about something that's in your control. It's not about something that's already happened. It's something that is not imminent. It's not here. It's a threat in the future, or it's a perceived threat. You think it's going to happen, and it's actually not.
Yeah.
Right? So that's anxiety. So now you want the Jewish view on anxiety.
Now the question is, what do we do about it?
Well, I think again, first of all, we have to also differentiate between regular, normal anxiety, what I call anxiety with a small a, and anxiety with the big A.
Yeah.
We're all a bit anxious sometimes, and it's fine. We just have to calm down, and we have to just believe in Hashem and just let go, and and breathe some breathing exercises if that helps, or exercise, whatever the case is. But the question is whether where it's more of a, when it becomes more of a problem. So I think we need to there are people that suffer from a real anxiety pathology. In other words, they have anxiety disorder, in which case they really need to get outside help and professional help. But there's so many different forms of, it can come like when you first start getting anxiety, the beginnings of anxiety. So again, going back to this book, it makes a very interesting point. Sometimes anxiety gets worse because we're afraid of the anxiety. See, again, it goes back to what nowadays, people are very scared of any discomfort. So if I feel a bit anxious, oy vey, like, you know what I'm saying? So then they get very scared of the feelings of anxiety, and it just gets worse because of that. Sometimes if it's small anxiety, we just have to know, anxiety is okay, so anxiety, just move on. On the contrary, anxiety can have some benefits too. It can actually remind you to be more alert. It can actually, there's some sort of study that people who public speak and they have anxiety beforehand. My grandfather was a bit like this. He was an amazing speaker, and I know, not people don't know this, but I know that every time he had to speak, even on a Friday night in shul, he was nervous beforehand.
Really?
Yep, always nervous to speak. But in a way, it made him a better public speaker. You always prepare properly, and you don't. I'm not talking about over anxiety here, but it can be a good thing. But I think one of the things we need to know about anxiety is the letting go of things that we can't control. If you ask about the Jewish view, right? There has to be a thing about bitachon. We don't run the world. And when we've done what we can to make something happen, we need to let go and let God do the rest. Right? I think that's paramount. Now, in this particular book I've been reading, it talks also about different things that anxiety can do for us. Sometimes it can make us more determined. Sometimes we're anxious about something, maybe we can confront it. If a person's anxious about connecting with other people and you hit it head on, you don't avoid it, but you actually say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. It can actually call out a greater strength. It can make us understand other people better. It can make us understand ourselves better. That is all true. But I'm talking about the anxiety in the form of worrying about what's going to be. Kind of what we do a little bit when we do a function. Like we do everything we can, and we worry. Is the weather going to be okay? Are people actually going to come? Is there going to be enough food?
Right.
Is the music going to work? Is the projector going to work? All these kind of things.
Yeah.
That's what we need to work on. We've done what we can. We believe that Hashem makes everything happen anyway. When we do what we need to do, then we need to actually sit back and let Him run the show.
How about anxiety for like a major life decision, like someone who's anxious to commit to get married? What would you advise? They've dated for a few years, it really all makes sense, it all matches up, they should really be getting engaged, but just worried, making such a big life decision can have a major major implications.
It can. So I think it's the same formula. First of all, when at the beginning, so what happens is like this. Typically what happens is like this, right? Someone will feel anxious about getting married or entering into a relationship. Then he'll be very anxious, the fact that he's anxious. And the anxiety will just get worse, right? I think we need to turn that around in the same sort of way. Number one, you feel a bit anxious. It's time to enter into a relationship, time to settle down. So you start to feel a bit anxious. You tell yourself, you know what? It's okay to be anxious. And in fact, I'm going to use it out. The fact that I'm anxious means I'm going to think about it. So in other words, so what do I need to do about it? Like, if you're not anxious at all, then there's something wrong with you. You need to be a little bit anxious so you could try and find the right one and the right thing and know that you prepared for a relationship.
You need to take it seriously.
Yeah, so it makes you take it a bit more seriously. That's correct. There's a study apparently about anxiety and driving. That if you go to get a license, they will always ask you if you have epilepsy or if you can see properly. They'll never ask you if you have anxiety. The reason is because anxious drivers never crash. They drive better.
Right.
So that's okay. A bit of anxiety is fine. However, what the other part you need to bring into the equation is when you start to get really anxious and worry, but how am I going to know? And how am I going to know this? And how am I going to know that? The answer is you don't know. And that's the point. Again, coming back, you need to, in life generally, we need to take risks. We need to make the best decision we can make and then jump into it. And when we jump into it, we need to know that Hashem is with us. God is with us. He's going to help us. Because He's in control, right? And also put in the work to make it work, and trust in Hashem that He will allow us to make it work.
Yeah. I find interestingly that anxiety hits specifically things that are not in your control. It's a very interesting thing. Like, things that you can control, so you do something about it. Something you can control, it's like almost like the only thing you can do about it is worry about it.
Correct.
It's like a form of control.
That's why it's a negative thing. Because, like, exactly, I need to do something about it, so I'm going to worry about it, right? Or sometimes, you legitimately worry. If someone's not well, you worry what's going to happen. That's why also they talk about one of the ways of dealing with anxiety is to be present. Worry about the now. What can you do now? Right? I'm worried about something in 2 weeks from now, but that's in 2 weeks from now. That's out of my control anyway, and I've done whatever I can to make it work. But what can I do now? Like, what can I, what purposeful, meaningful thing can I do now?
That's great. All right, everyone. Stay calm, if you can, and have a wonderful day.
See you, everyone.